are they going to add to the burden to these people, which is going to shorten their lifespan, interfere with their ability to think clearly? And why would you want your population to be apathetic and unable to think clearly and make decisions as independent thinking minds? I was one of the first people in the published literature to say when you remove thimerosal from the vaccines, you're not going to see much of a difference in autism rate. Everyone else that's working in this field was convinced it was the mercury. Now, there's no question mercury is toxic to the developing brain. There's no question about that. But the greatest toxicity is the number of vaccines being given and the fact that you're overstimulating the immune system. When you powerfully and repeatedly stimulate the immune system, it activates the brain's immune cell, the microglia, and that secretes destructive compounds, excitotoxins, immune cytokines, that have been proven beyond any shadow of a doubt in hundreds of research papers to produce abnormal development of the brain and destruction of certain areas of the brain and types of neurons. That's well known, that's established. Now, you have to ask, again, if this is so well known, why do we keep adding new vaccines? Because now we're insisting not only do they get the 46 vaccine, but then every 4 years, many of these vaccines are to be repeated throughout the rest of their life, even into adulthood. It's been estimated that they're going to propose 150 vaccines for adults throughout your life. Well, there's no way that the brain can tolerate 115 repetitive vaccinations. So it's not necessarily the mercury. The mercury adds to the toxicity, but it's the fact that the brain is being overstimulated immunologically.
Sure.
And that's proven.
And they also recently announced a new Army plan to develop DNA vaccines, which would use an electrostimulation process and supposedly go directly to the cells. And it would also, part of the project would be so they could deliver multiple vaccines in one quick blast, not have to use new needles for everyone, so they could do things fairly quickly. But do you have any idea what the potential dangers would be of DNA vaccines?
Well, it is an area that they're looking into so that they can give it in fewer vaccination exposures. And that's because they have difficulty getting people to keep coming in and getting these dozens and dozens of vaccines, so it'd be a lot more convenient just to give one. But you're still immunologically stimulating the body in a very, very powerful way over a prolonged period of time. If you do that in animals, it damages the brain. If you do that in animals that are young or during pregnancy, it will reproduce things like schizophrenia or autism. Sure. And we know in women, pregnant women, if during their pregnancy they develop a viral infection, the incidence of schizophrenia and autism goes up tremendously in their offspring as they get older. Of course, schizophrenia doesn't present until their teenage years. So there's a long period between the vaccination and the appearance of the schizophrenia, which gave a deniability for a long period of time. Well, the new research has shown it's not the virus that's causing the schizophrenia. It's the mother's immune reaction to the virus. So when her immune system is activated, it activates the baby's brain's immune system and produces a process called immunoexcitotoxicity that produces abnormal brain development and the schizophrenia and autism. When you stimulate the body's immune system, it automatically activates the brain's immune system, which is a separate immune system. It's operated by the microglia type brain cell. When that brain cell is activated during a natural infection, it's activated, kills the virus or bacteria, and then it shuts down. If you immunologically activate it by giving injections, like you do with a vaccine, it turns it on and it doesn't turn off very well. You give another vaccine a month later, 2 months later, that cell becomes hyperreactive. So the next reaction is infinitely more intense than the first one. So the brain stays in this state of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation of the brain is what's thought to lead to such diseases in adults like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Lou Gehrig's disease, Huntington's disease. And in infants and small children, it leads to neurodevelopmental problems, difficulty learning, ADD, ADHD. I think recently on the news they talked about the link between pesticides and ADHD. Well, the interesting thing, pesticides do the same thing as vaccines do. They activate this microglia immune cell in the brain. So what the pesticide is doing chemically is the same thing that the vaccine does during the injection. That is, it produces chronic brain inflammation, leading to ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, and sets you up later in life for chronic brain degeneration. This is the thing that's well demonstrated in the scientific literature, particularly neuroscience literature, but being totally ignored by the media, by health authorities, by regulatory agencies, by the people promoting vaccine. They're completely keeping this silent and away from the general public, so that mothers and people getting these multiple vaccinations do not know the danger that's inherent in this practice. If you look back at what Dr. Kay is saying in her book on molecular biology, that in 1910 this was the dream of these elitists, was to recreate man in the image of the elitist idea. And it was funded by enormous amounts of money from the tax-free foundations, which hide what they're doing with other types of philanthropy. So if they using their money for art museums and education programs and things that have a lot of public appeal, then underneath that they can hide these other things that they're doing. And then if they are exposed by someone, then they say, oh, well, we're promoting these vaccine programs in Africa because we care about these poor people and we're trying to protect them against these diseases, or we're doing this fluoridation program because we're interested in people's the health of their teeth. So it's easy to hide the true motivation of what you're doing. Now, do we have the smoking gun that proves this is what they're doing? Well, we don't have the exact smoking gun because they're smarter than that. They're not going to put it exactly in writing. But when you look at the writings of the Rockefellers and the Ford Foundation, they hint at these things, that population needs to be controlled, that we need to re-engineer human thinking and behavior. So if they're in favor of social engineering, if they're in favor of this science of man idea of remaking the human mind, it's a pretty strong indication that they will use their enormous power, influence, and enormous amounts of money in conjunction with pharmaceutical companies and others to bring these ideas about. You know, I find it ironic when people say they don't believe in certain conspiracy theories. Well, it's like H.G. Wells wrote his book. The title of his book is Open Conspiracy. Because it's not secret, and this is what you usually hear is, well, if this was true, how could they keep it secret? Well, they don't need to keep it secret. And it's not a secret because they write a lot about it. They write about the need for control in these different areas. They write about how we need to control behavior and how we need to re-engineer man. So it's in their writings. It's an open conspiracy, but they can keep people from making that final link because they never actually say exactly how they're doing it and what they're doing. It's just they fund it. You look for the funding behind things like fluoridation, and you look for funding behind some of these other efforts, and it always goes back to the tax-free foundations are the driving force behind it. And they're producing the justification for it by hiding it behind benevolent claims. Brave New World Revisited was about methods that then were known to control human behavior. You know, Huxley talked about strobotic injection, in which you gave some mild psychotropic drugs to the population and you could inject thoughts into their minds and they would think they thought them. And suddenly you would change their whole way of thinking without their knowledge. So he was writing about this in 1950s. So that's one book. H.G. Wells wrote about it. We have a number of people who were writing about the chemical alteration of the brain to change human thinking on a mass scale. So it's not a new idea, and unfortunately there are people who believe that's true. Now, this new move to put psychotropic drugs into the water supply, for instance lithium, should scare people. You know, they have no right to put psychotropic, mind-altering drugs in the water supply. It's very dangerous for one thing. We know lithium can accumulate in the brain. We know that in some people it can produce serious neurological disorders. We know that if you're, for instance, on lithium medication, does that mean you can't drink your tap water? Because the therapeutic dose is very close to the toxic dose. So we're going to have to supply special water to them. What do you do for small children? What do you do for babies? What do you do for pregnant women? They can't drink the water supply because it's going to have a very profound effect on a small baby's brain. And none of this is being considered. Well, then other people are already stepping forward. Well, not only should we add lithium to the water supply to prevent suicide and depression, we should add other drugs to the water. There's a British physician who said we ought to add statin drugs and antihypertensives to all water. Well, then there's other psychiatrists and people interested in human behavior who say, well, you know, there's other drugs we could alter human behavior with. Well, I don't think we need elitist scientists or technocrats, as you say, altering our thinking by putting things in our water supply. That's the drugging of America on a mass scale for these elitists to manipulate our minds. And they have no idea what it is. I mean, look at the fluoride program, for instance. Here it started out, it's very safe, it's very benign. Now, 60 years later, we find out, well, no, it's increased cancer rates 10%. It makes tumors grow faster. It increases bone fractures. It produces reproductive problems. What's one of the major things that's just exploded since I've been in medical school is infertility in young people. Fertility clinics are everywhere. Young people are having trouble conceiving. And no one has a scientific explanation other than these things that are being added to water and food, etc., that are known to affect human reproduction. This is another one of those living constitution rights where the left says, well, it's not in the Constitution. It was not proposed by the framers of the Constitution. It was not part of the contract between the state and the federal government, but we've inserted it on our own without any vote, without any constitutional methods of adding an amendment. We just decided it would be good for society to do this, and therefore we'll do it. And if later we find out we've created a tragedy, then, well, that's just the price of that you have to pay. You know, it reminds me of when Malcolm Muggeridge was traveling to the Ukraine during the great Ukrainian starvation imposed by Stalin. He was riding on the train with a reporter from the New York Times, and the dead bodies were just piled up like cordwood everywhere. And Malcolm Muggeridge was just shocked. He said, I can't believe what Stalin is doing. And he turned to the New York Times reporter, Walter Durante, and he said, aren't you shocked by this? And he says, oh, well, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet. We're building a new society.